Peavey Classic 30. These amps need no introduction from me. They've been around for a while. They are all over the place. You see them used, you see them traded, you see them on backlines, and whether or not you've used them, own them, they're definitely worth knowing how to dial in and how to get some great tones out of them. This is a more modern Peavey Classic 30. We're going to put it through its paces, hear a bunch of different tones, talk about some different ways you can get great tones out of this. So let's dive in with some tone. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I hope you enjoy. So the Classic 30, these are just everywhere. You see them all over the place. You frequently see them used. Again, you see them on backlines or one of its various counterparts. The other ones being the Classic 50s. There's a Classic 20 head. There's the Peavey Delta Blues. These are all kind of in the same realm. And they come from an amp designer named James Brown. Now, I am familiar with James Brown, who designed one of my favorite amps, which is my custom amp, which I've done a whole video on. It's a Custom Coupe 72. He really doesn't get the credit I think he deserves for being a pretty significant in modern amp designing, and it currently is with EVH. Now, I actually had a brief chat with him about this amplifier because I wanted to verify that he was one of the ones who designed it, and he was. And he said that it's largely been unchanged. I believe he doesn't believe it has been changed other than the speaker, really, since they came out. And these are great amps. They're real workhorse amps. They're real gigging performance amps. What I like about them is when you plug into it, it does all the right things you want for performance capabilities. Is it a recording amp? You could probably record with it and get some great tones out of it, but I think it really just excels as a gigging amp. It's small, it's fairly compact, it's not the lightest amp in the world, but it's not like back-breaking heavy. It's got a 12-inch speaker. It's got 2 channels, which are foot switchable. It also has a foot switchable boost and foot switchable reverb. It has an effects loop. It has a speaker out. It's a 12-inch speaker. Now, the speaker has changed over the years. Any given one that you get, it might have a different speaker. Also, obviously, they look different. The old ones look more like a Fender narrow panel, whereas the new ones have the little scoop with the Peavey logo. But they're very straightforward tonally. I think one of the things that really strikes me about these is they have a sound, they do their sound well, and their sound really works in a live setting. And there's this kind of punchiness to them, and specifically when you really listen to the tone, there's not necessarily a lot of sag on these amps. There's not a lot of sink. It's very, like I said, it's kind of punchy, it projects, which again makes it really great for gigging situations. I love an amplifier with a tube rectifier that has that nice big squishy sag, like my basement or something. But a lot of the nuances of that basement get lost in a band setting. Something like the Classic 30, it just punches. It just gets your tone right there where you need it. But it does it in a way that's not harsh or unpleasant. Some amps, they'll be like, well, it cuts really well, but in a way that you don't necessarily want. This one has nice range on the tone knobs. There's, you can tailor it to your different guitars. It's present. The attack of the notes is really interesting because, like I said, if you listen really closely, the attack kind of has this rounded, almost like mid-rangey punch. I'm talking about really like that sort of top layer of your sound. Now, for controls, you've got your 3-band EQ, you've got your reverb, you have your volume, you've got switches for your channel switching and your boost, and your drive channel has the pre and post. Basically, preamp gives you more distortion, post-amp gives you more robust power. So that's really how you dial it in. So if you want a bluesier tone that's a little bit smoother, you turn the post up and the pre down. If you want a really heavy driving tone, you turn the pre up and the post down, and use the post kind of to figure out where your volume is as well. Now, this amp kind of always sounds like it does. I'm not saying it always sounds exactly the same, because obviously it has a great clean channel, has a great drive channel. But like the drive channel, it's not like a Swiss Army knife where it's like, oh, you can make it sound like this and you can make it sound like this. It kind of always sounds like it sounds, and you can sort of set the level of drive that you want. Now, I do think that on this amp, when you turn the pre all the way up, it sounds grainy unless you get it really loud. And at 30 watts, it does get really, really loud. So the best way I think to do it is to keep the preamp dialed back a bit, and then you can also use that mid boost if you want to kind of punch it up a little bit. But it really gets some nice sweet levels of gain, anywhere from like 4 all the way up to 8 or 9 on the pre knob. Oh, you also have an effects loop. There's an effects loop. So you have an effects loop. Moving on. The interesting thing about this amplifier is that I think the way that you really shape it is with the volume and tone on your guitar. And of course, just which guitar you choose makes a dramatic difference. Now, yeah, you could say that's true of any tube amp or any amplifier really, but with this one specifically, the way that it responds to your gear, it's almost like it responds more. Can amps do that? Can one kind of just do this more? This is terrible. People tune into you because you're supposed to know stuff. You're supposed to be able to tell. Some tube amps do this more. But in all seriousness, like, you can have it on the same setting, and if you have a Les Paul versus a Telecaster, and you just play with the volume and the tone a little bit, you can make them sound drastically different. You can really emphasize that punchiness. You can make it sound kind of spanky and really bright and in your face. You can just dial it back a little bit, and it really gets nice and smooth but still present, which makes it great for pretty much any Americana genre of music. You can use this for blues, jazz, rock, funk, whatever you want. It's kind of got just the right tone. So let's dive back in with some drive tones, as a lot of players are going to want to use this amplifier for its drive. Now it's an EL84 amp, but while the clean channel sounds a little bit more American, kind of in its responsiveness and its roundness. There's a hint of voxiness to it, of course, part of the EL84s. The drive channel has almost like a brown sound to it. So let's check out some drive. We're going to start with the pre-gain all the way up. And again, you'll hear it's not a bad sound. It's a little bit grainy for my taste. But then I'm going to do a similar thing afterwards, where I'm going to turn the drive back, the pre-drive back, and kick on the mid-boost. It's still nice and saturated, so it's great for leads, but it's just got more definition, less graininess. Switch to the neck pickup and just back off the volume and the tone a hair, and you'll hear it really smooths out and gets a nice kind of blues lead tone. For this, I'm using a Gibson Les Paul Deluxe, so let's have a listen. let's get into just the versatility of the clean channel. Now, I'm not changing the EQ on any of this. When I dial in this amp, I like to push the mids a bit, back the treble off just a slight bit, and then the bass is pretty average, you know. The reverb is nice. You can get the reverb present without it washing out your signal. And then volume to taste, again, I mentioned that on the drive channel, I like to keep the preamp drive back further. Whether or not you're going for a really subtle bluesy tone and then boosting it with the mid boost or with pedals, or whether or not you're going for a more saturated drive tone, just you want to keep that backed off so that it doesn't get grainy. With the clean channel, it again, it's just totally working your guitar volume, your pickup selection, just your guitar selection in general, and you can make it do a lot of different things. So we're going to hear several different tones here. We're going to hear a couple of different tones from the Telecaster and also one from the Les Paul. So I'll show you how it can get punchy and kind of funky and very nice and rhythmic, as well as bright and biting, but with a smoothness to it that's great for some jazzier blues. And then for straight up jazz, using it on the Les Paul, really just backing off the volume and the tone a little bit, and it just becomes this silky smooth, really nice jazz tone. So let's listen to some of the different things that the clean tone can do here. And again, I'm not changing the EQ at all. This is just changing subtle adjustments on the guitars. All right, now I mentioned the versatility a lot, so let's take the drive channel and back the preamp way back further and see kind of how subtle we can get it sounding. If you want to use it for blues or folk, you just want a little bit of added grit, but not kind of go crazy. So this has got the pre back a bit and then the post up higher. So that's it, folks. This is the Peavey Classic 30. Again, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, whether or not you've really kind of given it a lot of time to think about, or whether it's one you've just always seen or even tried in passing. Let us know. Do you have much experience with this amp? I actually briefly owned a Classic 50 years ago. I used it for maybe 2 or 3 gigs, I think It was in August of 2012, so it was almost exactly 10 years ago that I briefly owned that amp. And it was really cool. It just was expendable. And I think that's the way that these amps are sort of looked at. Is there, you get them, you play them for a while, maybe you trade them, maybe you sell them, maybe you do something else. But they're really valuable to have around because they're just solid, reliable, good sounding performance amps that really have held their weight for a long time and will probably continue to hold their weight for a lot longer. So let us know what you think in the comments. I'm Jack Fossett. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.